Welcome again to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer, Professor of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I serve as the host of the program. I'm joined today by our two regular critical commentators and a special guest. So Denise Keele is a professor of political science at Western Michigan University, and Denise also works at the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. She chairs the Working Group on Climate Change, and she's also sort of chair of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, and she probably does a few other things that we don't have time to mention. On my left is Don Cooney. Don is a professor in the School of Social Work at Western, former city commissioner, 22 years on the city commission. And our special guest is the newly elected mayor of the city of Kalamazoo, David Anderson. David is also a longtime serving city commissioner and made the jump over to mayor this time around. And so welcome, Mr. Mayor. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Congratulations on your election. And I guess we'll start off just by asking you kind of a broad vision or view that you have of the city as you enter your term as mayor. Sort of this is the time of the year for all the state of the state of the union, state of the state.
Yeah,
so
right.
maybe you can give us a mini state of the city here to get us started this morning.
Okay, let's get started. I'm sure Don can help me too, as you know. I mean, if there's questions about any history, Don's got many years on me at the city commission, so there's that. I mean, a lot of the work of the city, is continuing work.
Right.
And a lot of the work of the city you don't talk about during the campaigns because in some ways it doesn't engage a lot of people, whether it's about our invisible infrastructure underground, our water and sewer lines. You don't really walk around with signs about sewer lines necessarily, at least that's the way it has been. Streets you do hear about, parks, that sort of thing. So that's the regular everyday nuts and bolts of the city that just has to keep going. And there's 650 folks who work at the city of Kalamazoo every day. And that means people in public safety that are out when everyone else is off on vacation in the middle of the night, fighting fires, keeping the streets safe, plowing streets too, all that sort of thing. So really there's a lot of that work that just continues. And the big thing that kicks it off any year is the city passing our budget. And that just happened at our last meeting in January. By our charter, we have to approve our budget, it's a little late actually, for the fiscal year, which is our calendar year, so 2020 is our fiscal year. That budget has to be passed before the end of January. So we work on that budget for a few months, but administration gets it to us on December 1st, and then we've got the holidays to look it over, and then vote on it in January. And so it's interesting because I am starting to get emails now about, oh, let's do this. So here's a good idea. Let's spend $500,000 this way. And it's just a little disconnect there because we just passed our budget for this year. So for new things, obviously we can change things, but for new things, now it's time to start talking about 21 budget, which sometimes it just seems like an awkward timing. But that all said, I think that as it goes in Kalamazoo, we are in many ways in as good a shape as we have been in a long time. I don't know, Don, if you'd agree with me about
totally,
that.
totally. Yep.
And Don and I spent a lot of time together in this budget time deciding what not to fund or who to lay off.
I know.
Or how we're going to end our neighborhood liaison officer program that we had in public safety, which we ended some years ago, just didn't have the money. So it is the case that we, with the help of the Foundation for Excellence, we do now have some breathing room to do some things we've always wanted to do. And so there's the regular work, and I just want to say just a couple things about that. And then there's kind of the new things coming our way that you never know exactly what that is. The regular work, here's some more exciting things about the regular work, is that we are getting to fund things on public safety, like our group violence intervention. So we're doing hard work there, not just public safety work, but work to engage with the community and try to have public safety be more than just enforcement. So that's an exciting thing on that regular work. Another thing that's exciting about our regular work is on the sewer and water side of things. And that is, I mean, we, I just said earlier, no one marches with a sign about water and sewer, but that's not true. Recently, we've recognized the full force of that And now not paying attention there
right.
makes a big difference right here in Flint. And of course, we're seeing that across the country now, and now PFAS is coming up,
Yep.
so on and so forth. But the exciting thing we're getting to do on the water and sewer side, which is usually a boring topic, is replace many more lead service lines than we ever were able to do in the past. I mean, we are exponentially working on that, not just funded by, water fees, but by additional money from Foundation for Excellence. We still have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 to 9,000 lines that may be lead service lines
that
to the
many.
city of Kalamazoo. It's an old city.
Yes.
Because it seems like you've been doing a lot of that. It seems like, every time you're driving around, you see
Yes.
one of those projects going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're doing that,
Yep.
trying to organize that when the road has to be repaired. So we're not repairing the road, then coming back next year and cutting it up to take,
Yeah, yeah.
lead lines out. So that's an exciting thing on that
Yes.
side of things. Even more so though, this year, big jump this year in our budget as it relates to replacing infrastructure. Probably if you follow this, we got these boil water advisories that come out, water mains breaking all the time.
Yeah.
We have literally 100-year-old water mains down on the ground under streets. And so there's a big push this year to replace water mains. These are cast iron water mains, not flexible in any way, shape, or form. Slight, frost heave, move in the ground, settling, things break. So that's our invisible infrastructure, which is so important. It's not just important every day, but it's sort of part of, I think, what you think of as like a climate action
For
plan
sure.
in terms of resiliency
Yes.
and having an infrastructure that works for people here and being able
right.
to deliver one of the most basic things
That's
that
right.
we need: drinkable water and treating our waste,
Yeah.
which is foundationally important for any civilization. So even on those things that are more standard, we get to do extra stuff now, which I'm really excited about. And then what's new? What's
Yeah.
going on? So you have things that come out of nowhere, kind of,
Yeah.
like dealing with issues like a car wash, adjacent to the Silent Lake property, which obviously is a great deal of interest in town, and how we're going to manage that issue.
Yeah.
Also, in the state of Michigan, we passed, an adult use marijuana law now. We did what's called a delayed opt-in. We set ourselves a date, which is June 1st, and so we got a lot of work to do to determine what does that look like in Kalamazoo.
So you need to come up with an ordinance, right?
We need to come up with an ordinance about location and zoning and how that's going to work.
Right.
And we're getting a lot of pressure now from business people that are in the business. Get this done. And at the same time, the state still hasn't finished their rules.
Yes.
They still haven't turned out their final rules. We're waiting around for that. It seems wise to wait. I can tell you, I'm getting more and more emails about, come on, we need to get this done. It's going to help our business model. Maybe some of the folks who are struggling to get the kind of sales they want on the medical side are hoping to be able to do the adult use side right in the same establishment, increase the traffic. That is certainly allowed under this law. So that all has to be figured out, and we've set ourselves a date. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but we're doing our kind of first hearing on that. I think it's February 5th.
Okay.
I can clarify that. But over at the City Commission chambers for interested parties to come in and start giving our city attorney, Clyde Robinson, some feedback on what is most helpful. So you've got that work going on. You also have this work that our new vice mayor, Patrice Griffin, has been pushing forward for a couple of years now. And this is, interestingly enough, an ordinance that is modeled a bit after what Grand Rapids has done. And oftentimes you think, well, we're the progressive city and Grand Rapids is kind of behind the curve. I think we've always felt that way. In certain ways, that hasn't been the case. Grand Rapids is leading the way in terms of LEED buildings per capita. The environmental designation that it comes to LEED, and also here's what they're looking at, and for this ordinance is also going to be working its way through the process, is asking landlords to be more accepting of taking tenants that have been being screened out for a variety of reasons. There's a housing crisis right now in the country. We're not creating enough housing. But in addition, there are also more and more folks now, due to the fact that we have many, many people that have had experiences with the criminal justice system who are getting screened out of housing based on their criminal history and their source of income. For example, if they have what was called a Section 8 voucher, now a housing choice voucher, and want to use that to help pay the rent, and landlords do not have to take someone with a Section 8 voucher, even though that voucher will pay the rent. So it's just trying to work through that. How can we fairly ask landlords in Kalamazoo to be more open in their screening process to allow people to be able to participate in getting into housing? So that's another process we have to go through. This public process, input from landlords, that's going to be starting out here soon. General public will have another series of open events. We're going to have these open events on the marijuana ordinance. We have the open public please come events for our housing human rights ordinance is what it's being called now. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to get into all that right now. But you know, at the same time, we also passed our our climate
emergency.
Yes, and talked about creating our own Kalamazoo Climate Action Plan, which is something that is, once again, I mean, this is our brand in Kalamazoo, engagement. And that is what we've done all through Imagine Kalamazoo, this idea of trying in every way we can to engage people who live in Kalamazoo in the process. And so this is going to be another big engagement activity that we want to do this year because we want to get that done this year. So I'm probably missing some things, but you start thinking about all those initiatives you have going, the things that you have to deal with that come up that you're not expecting, and keeping the regular work going, and it's augmented regular work. So,
all right, let me just take you back a couple of steps here, just in case people are not really clear about what the Foundation for Excellence is and how that has helped you deal with the budgetary problems. Can you just sort of briefly walk us through what that is and what comes out of that foundation and what its other activities is funding?
Sure, Ron, I appreciate that. So, if you go, I'll back up just a step just before that. If you go to the Michigan Municipal League website in the state of Michigan, MML, you can pull up how much of an annual shortfall there has been from the state of Michigan to local jurisdictions when it comes to state shared revenue, which was, there's two parts of that. There's a constitutional part, can't be changed. There's a statutory part that can be, that's been reduced. So we have been not receiving our presumably appropriate or fair share of state shared revenue for years and years and years. And that led us into a situation where we literally had a structural deficit we were dealing with every single year.
The state was balancing its budget by imposing constraints on you at the local level.
We're in higher education. We understand that the change in the state-funded model, even though we're a public university, right? Very similar from 70% to 20%, right? Somewhere in there over the last 20 years. So. So that set the stage. Other things, which there's actually discussion in the state of Michigan now about Proposal Pay A and the Headley Amendment, which together make it very difficult for a city to keep up on its property tax revenue, which is the lifeblood of what funds public services, its property tax revenue. And so based on that, there was a deficit. We watched Detroit go bankrupt. And other cities have emergency managers in Michigan. So that sets the stage for that. We're laying people off. We even did a big incentive program to get people to retire early, just to really reduce the number of folks. And that hurt all over the place. So a lot of discussion. Probably remember the blue ribbon panel that happened. A lot of folks participated, community folks on that. A whole list of ideas, some doable, some not. And we did some of those things. Sell parking ramps, I think, was one of those things. We sold a couple parking ramps and that sort of thing. But it was a little bit like, throwing, chairs overboard to keep yourself from sinking quite as fast. It's around the edges. So anyway, this proposal came up. It was an idea, discussion. It came out of, a previous mayor, awesome mayor, Bobby Hopewell, city manager's office, other folks, about this idea of creating another funding stream for the city of Kalamazoo. Really, in the scope of it, very unique. The model, not entirely unique, because we already have things like Friends of Recreation, where you've got folks donating to a fund, and then within the city of Kalamazoo, there's a Parks Recreation Board that kind of determines how those extra
non-public funds will be spent. So there's
Those are
kind of small models of that
Dedicated
all over.
funds toward that
Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
project.
But this was literally a bigger idea. So the idea is that you create an endowment, and then over time, the net endowment creates income, and that income kind of gets funneled through processes like the Foundation for Excellence Board. And at the end of the day, though, it's the city commission that determines how those funds will be spent. So there's a lot of advisory kind of language that comes with it, but right now, it's, as it should be, still considered public money. No one's getting to say from the outside, oh, city, spend it this way. It's the city commission in public that has to make that decision, what's going to happen. So what happened with that Foundation for Excellence money? Well, the foundation isn't funded. Yeah, the endowment is not there. It was imagined. However, we worked off a 3-year initial agreement, memorandum of understanding. Now we have a new 3-year agreement, which amounts to somewhere in the neighborhood of altogether 95 million over 3 years. We just voted on a big portion of that with our budget. So what does that mean? That means that we've done 3 things with the Foundation for Excellence money. One is we reduced our millage rate for City of Kalamazoo taxes. We can't change public schools, we can't change library. City taxes we reduced because people kept saying, I can't afford to live in the city, I can't afford to invest in the city. We want young families here, we want people buying and owning homes, that sort of thing. So we try to move ourselves back to be a little closer to some of our adjacent jurisdictions that happen to have lower taxes and not the aging infrastructure to take care of, and larger state equalized values than we do. For example, Portage has a SEV that take in taxes vastly more than the city of Kalamazoo, even though they have 2/3 of the population. So that was one thing, reduce that. That's for this year. I'll just run the numbers real quick. So this year, rounding off, we're filling that gap by reducing the taxes. That's about $12 million a year. Another piece of it is this structural deficit I talked about, shortfall from state revenue, about $4 million. And then the balance of that, and this is, the rest of it's great, but this is the exciting part, is this aspirational spending expectation, which is about $8 million this year. Expected to be $10 million next year, and for the next 2 years under this MOU. So it's this literally has given us an opportunity to dream. And what we were doing before was, just tightening the belt every year. So we've had a chance to dream, and still, it's not like there's an unlimited pot of money.
Right.
There's limits on everything. We're still dealing with a certain scarcity. Looking around at our roads here and in Michigan, we don't have enough money to do all that. But we have an opportunity to dream in some very important areas. So that's this $8 million piece, and that comes in part by recommendations from a committee at the city, kind of an ad hoc group called the Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, which Don has been involved in just since the very beginning. The Mayor Bobby Hopewell's still on that group. So there's kind of recommendations that come through that. Presentations get made to the Foundation for Excellence Board, staff come in, but then, that is the kind of work where we're doing great programs like the Youth Mobility Fund. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was this idea where high school students could use your ID, ride the bus anytime, use it as a library card, worked for their school ID. So there's been a couple bumps with that, but that's starting back. We took a little hiatus there for a minute, but so what's that going to be? Is that $1 million a year? Something like that. So that's going to start eating into that $8 million. Youth Mobility Fund. Other things like making our parks and rec programs in summer much more robust and creating a lot of opportunities not only for young people, all day, safe, great parks and rec programs, but for other, little older kids, much expanded work programs, and trying to infuse reading time into those kinds of programs with that whole idea. And I know this sort of seems like can get tired as we talk about it over and over again, this idea of addressing intergenerational poverty. And sometimes it feels like people's eyes glaze over when you say that. It seems so big. What do you do? How does that work? Do you really mean what you say? But I think it's a work in progress, but we're trying to figure out how you do that. And that's cooked into that whole Foundation for Excellence idea. So, it's been a phenomenal thing for what the city and what the city's able to do. And also allowing us to partner with great nonprofits, whether it's on the housing side now, talking about housing, Urban Alliance, Momentum, those kinds of programs we haven't been able to do before.
Yeah, David, that's a wonderful overview. Thanks so much. Boy, you guys, no wonder you're so busy.
Yeah.
Right, all that stuff. Housing. You're an expert in housing. Every city in the country is having huge problems with homelessness and other kinds of things. And so there's no city that can solve this problem by itself.
Right.
But I always thought that we should have a strategic plan. Looking around, we had a program here last night that Chris ran.
Right.
And we kind of, one of the proposals was setting up a committee, people that know something about housing.
Right.
And for a year, look at best practices around the country and then come up with a strategic plan. We can't solve this problem by ourselves.
Right.
But there are other cities that have done some very interesting things and made some great inroads.
Right.
Avalon Housing in Ann Arbor, for one.
Right.
And then we would have some kind of a strategic plan to deal with this.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that is a great idea, and it's interesting that you mention that because that is one of the things I've been thinking about a great deal in the last month or so. I'm not sure if it needs to take us a year, honest to goodness. And I think that, we kind of started on this work. We have this partnership with LISC in town. Great to have LISC in town, and this sort of idea about number of units. But I do believe that we need a plan, but I want to get started on that plan this year. I don't want to wait till next year.
Good.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And I think that plan needs a theme that runs right through the middle of it, that is just bright and everybody can recognize. In my opinion, that plan needs to tie right back to what I just talked about, intergenerational poverty.
Yeah.
That has got to be the theme that runs right through the housing plan. So, for example, it's going to include things like affordable rental housing, no doubt. It's going to include things like maybe some transitional housing programs. It's going to include things like permanent supportive housing for people who need a deep level of supports to be successful. But I really want to see a big theme run through this, and that is, honestly, towards homeownership. And it's an idea of the plan isn't 27 units. The plan is a plan of motion, of trajectory in people's lives, so that when you're building rental housing, when you're in that housing, whoever's developing that, this is not the end for you. We are imagining that this is, this won't be the case for everybody, but we are imagining that this is a portion of time that you're going to be using to either improve your education or improve your job skills or get a better job, help your kids be successful in school, but that you are imagining that as you progress through this and obtain more financial literacy and that sort of thing, that at the end of that we have home purchase options available for people. So at the end of the day, if we're talking about generational poverty, I mean, everybody knows what is like the core, wealth source for working class people. It has been for, some generations here, is home ownership. And if we can't help people get to that, and that means finding affordable, models for purchase, I think it's better for neighborhoods, it's better for families. And so that's what I've been thinking about that's the bright line right through this thing. And that we have to start asking when we're providing some city funds. City doesn't get to say everything that happens, for example. I mean, a private developer can come into town, buy a lot, and say, I want to do this kind of housing, and that's it. It's their own plan. But the nonprofits, whatever the city is helping with, we've got to say, okay, you tell me what you are doing so that you are helping people continue to imagine what their trajectory is going forward here. So that's what I'm sort of thinking on, not a static plan, a plan in motion, but it's got a simple theme that, I mean,
Yeah.
it really, even though I talked too long, in 1 minute you can tell somebody. So,
Very good. Good.
So, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of the themes so I've been in Kalamazoo 10 years now, which is an anniversary I'm struggling with maybe a little bit as the newbie on this show. But it was interesting to move to Kalamazoo, and I do environmental politics. I immediately got the sense of Kalamazoo has always been a sort of forward-thinking, a bit of progressive. The amount of philanthropy in town, the amount of citizen engagement is sort of different in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo is a different place. For example, you were talking about waters and sewers. I was really pleased when I first moved here to see that Kalamazoo long ago, over our watersheds, that's where all of our protected areas are. Right? The simple idea of preserving the land around your drinking water sources probably saved us a lot of money over the last however many years, to where we're finally having to upgrade some of those systems because of what we've learned about
our wellhead
lead.
protection program.
So
been around for a long time.
I think and I really was pleased then to see it is always kind of a back and forth of when is Kalamazoo going to lead, and when is it nice to say, like, for the climate emergency, we beat Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor on that, right? Like, there is sort of a little bit of maybe intercity competition on those things. With all the different, these are huge agenda items, right? I mean, the housing and, of course, the climate action planning that you've worked with us with. The meeting I was at yesterday was your other theme. How are we going to get focus groups and more engagement on the idea of the climate action plan? And to me, those ideas go together. So when we're thinking about housing, and we're thinking about the climate action plan, and we've got this aging infrastructure, boy, what an opportunity is what I think to retrofit houses, to insulate, to do all the work that we can do to be climate resilient, as well as provide these services. So I'm just wondering, from your viewpoint, how you think that the city and you will manage the integration of the different planning features.
I mean, so that's a really good question. The thing is, I think there's a natural integration of all this stuff. I mean, just what you talk about. The city, with the lead of Kalamazoo Neighborhood Housing Services, just got that $2 million federal grant to abate lead in properties. So that's huge. But getting that abatement done is also what allows us to do other work. So aligned with that, a robust weatherization program, it makes total sense. It makes total sense on the affordability side. It makes total sense on the climate side, on the energy efficient, on the conservation side, all of that. So those kinds of things totally align. We got to dabble in this a little bit when the ARA money came through, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, back in 2009, and we did things. We put a green roof on City Hall. Don't hear much about that. I'm not sure if we ever measured if it's doing anything.
It still
for us.
exists.
It's symbolic. It's there.
I've been there.
Replaced our old windows in there with double pane windows and some storms, that sort of thing. And but that all said, I think we are aligned now on our new building that we are expecting that everything is built, whether it's multifamily, even if you look at Matt Hollander's project, the Kramer project, I think that's going to be a platinum LEED project. So, so we can align all those things, I think. More so even if you talk about more mundane things like walkability, all right, which fits entirely into that. Now, I've been getting a lot of pressure lately about the perennial problem, shoveling our sidewalks. And maybe they're shoveled, but then you plow through and then there's a big mound at the crossing. That's something we're going to have to address. Someone actually sent me an email recently saying some cities are just starting to do all the shoveling themselves. We expect people to shovel their own sidewalks. I started running the numbers on that. It's like, okay, well, maybe there goes half of our aspirational funding. So maybe it won't be that. But our work on walkability and other means of getting around is entirely aligned with that. I mean, and the thing about it is that I'm not sure if there's anyone that doesn't agree with those things anymore, to tell you the truth. And even working with Bronson here, that is very interested in Kalamazoo of having housing that's affordable, that's close enough, so that people aren't having, maybe they can get rid of one of their cars, making them walk to work every day. So then you're starting to pair things together like health, individual health, walking more, building structures that are resilient over the course of time. particularly on that side of things. I mean, I think there's just so
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
that aligns.
I cut you off, Don.
No,
What-
so
you
I
were
was
gonna
going to,
keep going.
okay, David, the other thing
Yeah.
I want to talk about, which the city can't solve by themselves, I know, and that is poverty.
Yep.
We know we got terrible statistics on that, especially with African American youth,
Right.
almost 50%.
Yep.
Right. So we have this shared prosperity program.
Yes.
I'm concerned that we that there's models out there, and there is pretty much an agreement nationwide that if you really want to do something about poverty, you have to do several things. First of all, it has to be locality based. It has to be like neighborhood based.
Right.
It has to be assets based. We have to build on the assets that are in that neighborhood, and there has to be a collective response. We have to get the people together in that neighborhood, because we have so many resources
Right.
in that neighborhood, to get them all on the same page and pushing forward with that. And then there has to be measurable goals and accountability to
Right.
those goals.
Yeah.
And I think that the city could be the catalyst to promote that in the 3 neighborhoods in the city where we got these problems.
Right.
And it's disappointing to me that we haven't done that.
Yeah.
I know that that Tim Light has given $1 million
Right.
to and that's money's going to the Upjohn Institute.
Right.
And here we are, it's over almost 2 years now.
Right.
And what do we got to show for that?
Right.
I mean, I remember one of the Upjohn people came to one of the meetings of Shared Prosperity and said, okay, we're working on this now to get some kind of a scorecard where we could measure and how we do this year, how we do next year.
Yeah.
So now we got these 2 things here, and in 3 years, we'll have that scorecard. 3 years? No, we don't need 3 years to do
Right.
that.
Right.
So I'm concerned that I think there has to be some more life in that shared prosperity group.
Yeah. I agree too. So, this will be our next show.
Yeah.
When I leave with a list of things to check on and come back and talk about.
Right, right,
I know.
And I'd be happy to do that, as a
Yeah.
matter of fact,
Yeah.
if it doesn't bore people to tears.
No,
But
great.
I couldn't agree more. And I know that there seems to be this tendency, I know you both work in a big institution, where things sort of slow
Yeah.
down in some, whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
fog of bureaucracy at some time or another.
Yes.
And that is an extremely frustrating experience. And I know that you've been experiencing that with Shared Prosperity. So you're still meeting regularly? Maybe I should come to those
Yes, you
meetings,
should
add
come to
that
the
to my
meeting.
schedule, and come to those, because I think we met with Esto.
Yes.
Whereas over at Poor Richards a couple weeks ago or something now, and I think you mentioned to me about this Tim Light money and wondering, okay, what's coming out of that? So I went back and asked, well, it's not all spent, supposedly, as I understand. Okay, fine, because
Yeah.
I asked about it because in our budget it showed $1 million last year and 0 this year. So like, does that mean it's all gone? No, it's not all gone. It's just been allocated and now it's being spent over the years. So I'm embarrassed to say I don't know exactly why it's taking so long. It wouldn't seem like it would have to, but I couldn't agree more, is that just like I'm feeling urgency about the housing, I feel this is entirely consistent with that. And I mean, I think these ideas are, couldn't be more aligned with each other about trajectory for individual families and the support services and whatever other structure you put around that. So I would like to think that SPK and SPK recommendations would just be entirely aligned with whatever our housing plan is and the whole business. And I mean, it seemed like we could sit around this table in 15 minutes. We could come up with a handful of things. It seems like, well, let's measure this, let's
Yeah.
measure that,
Yeah.
and so I don't know
Right,
why that's
sure.
taking so long.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, I'm glad you're
I'm-
paying
I'm-
attention to it.
Yeah.
It's fabulous that we have W. Upjohn Institute in town. I mean, great resource, nationally recognized, and a group of really smart people. So I don't know the details of exactly what we're waiting for, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hard one. Yeah. But that's great. You got it on your agenda. You're going
Yeah.
to focus on that. That's
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
So I was going to just
ahead.
to follow up on that. I think one of the themes that you're talking about, and one of the themes I talk about in class, and the talk I'll give today is always about engagement, and is always about citizens' responsibilities to be part of these things. And so I think part of what we're talking about here, with especially the foundation, right, and when does bureaucracy stop and start, and when does the citizen engagement start? And I know the city's done a lot of things with the planning process to engage citizens, but do you think there are areas where the engagement could be improved, or the transparency of that? How do you view that ongoing process?
Right. So
I mean, that's what Don's
awesome
asking,
question.
right? How do we know what to pay? I mean, there's so many things to pay attention to, and I'm always arguing to class, go to these meetings, your local voice, and it does matter in Kalamazoo.
Sure it
We've
does.
seen that
Sure it
over
does.
and over
Yeah.
again. How is there a way for us to do even better
Well,
on that
I'm
goal?
gonna be a little facetious
Okay.
about that. Make people mad.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the planning commission
Oh,
meeting.
wow.
It's-
Holy
Okay.
cow.
Yeah.
No lack of citizen
No,
engagement.
there was not.
I hope the fire marshal isn't watching. Violated occupancy numbers, I'm sure, by a vast
Yes, we
amount.
did.
So that was packed. So
Yeah.
it proves that engagement can
It's
happen.
absolutely,
On
and
the
that it
other hand,
works.
you don't want to be making people mad every week.
Right.
So, and, you know, at the same time, we passed our plus $200 million budget at the city commission.
Yep.
What was that, a week or so before? I can't remember what the date was.
Was anybody there?
22nd or something? I don't think anybody commented on it. Maybe there's two people in the chamber.
This is right. This is what I mean. Right? There's a give and take here that I think, you know, especially to my students, I try to impress upon them, and that might have been a very important meeting.
Yes, and so it is. So that gets back to this whole human nature business,
is.
and we're going to deal this in a bunch of ways. Is that what is engaging us nationally, you know, on social media and that
Right.
sort of thing? It's anger a lot.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately.
And so, how do you know, this is, I mean, if I could answer this,
Yeah.
I probably would be able to go do something else. But in terms of getting people engaged, people have their lives, they have other
do.
things to do. How do you engage folks in things that they, you know, do really care about? For example, last night, I didn't come to the event that was here, they were talking about housing,
Yeah.
and because I've got a lot of events to go to, I
Sure.
went to the Eagle
Yep.
hearing.
Yep.
You know, which is the Environment, Great
Lakes
Lakes
Energy.
and Energy?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So it used to be called?
Department of Environmental Quality, which
Right,
was
exactly.
probably easier to say.
Yes, it is. MDEQ. So they had a hearing in the city
That's
commission
right.
chambers, okay? And that was an air quality hearing. And it was specifically about the fact that, you know, we have something potentially very good happening in Kalamazoo, which is a $600 million investment by Graphics Packaging.
right.
And I mean, that's huge. And it's going to be some new great jobs there, not a lot of them, but
Yeah.
some good jobs and big investment, help our tax base. And I mean, absent other things, I mean, recycling, you know, how can you
Yep.
really have a problem with that? I mean, big, efficient cardboard recycling that's going on there. So, but there's been odor concerns
Yes.
out of that plant. Maybe we're part of that, Don, I don't know. We have our wastewater treatment plant
Right.
over there adjacent. I know we
Yes.
probably are. But that all said, potential huge investment in Kalamazoo, and there's a hearing last
That's right.
night, and just a
Handful of
commission chambers, and there's just a handful of people there, and I mean, people did show up.
Yes.
Reverend Jerry Wilkerson,
Yeah.
representing Northside Ministerial Alliance, showed up with concerns about that.
Yeah.
The gentleman who's the chair of our Environmental Concerns Committee.
Oh yeah, Paul Manstrom. Mhm.
Not
Oh
Paul
no.
anymore.
Oh,
It's-
that's right. He stepped down.
Right.
So yes. Oh, you're
Ian,
going to put
is
me
that
on. Yes, Ian.
Yeah, showed up with his two sons, so it shows that people have other lives, and maybe his wife was doing something or other, and he had to bring them along, but
Yeah.
there was really no turnout.
Yeah.
So,
I send
don't
my
know.
students for extra credit, just so you know. So when you get a
Yes.
couple, so who knows? But no, I mean, this is again, that's the point I try to make all the time,
Yeah.
and especially at the local level, when you're sometimes the only member of the public at a public meeting, your voice is also pretty loud. And
It is pretty
whatever
loud.
your comment is the one that's going to get heard. So
Yes, it is.
I'm not sure how we do that better as citizens or from
don't know
from
either.
your side, but it's to me the perennial problem.
And people maybe need to know that but there are ways for them to plug in here, like the Environmental Concerns Committee, right?
That's right.
I mean, the whole thing with the climate action,
That's right.
the climate emergency declaration,
That's
that
right.
started by a group going to the Environmental Concerns Committee,
That's
which is a
right.
group of citizens who have this
Right.
concern.
Right.
We presented our idea to them, and there was discussion there. We worked with them to present
Yes.
a resolution that eventually went to the city commission.
right.
So that's a way to
That's
sort of
right.
get plugged in. And
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that people often know that they
They
can
don't.
participate in these kinds of committees
Right.
that are,
Right.
you know, so probably you have lots of committees like that with which you go asking
They-
because citizens aren't there.
Right.
And some of them are, I mean, you have to give people credit, and I actually called people before the planning
Yes.
commission meeting and just said thank you so much. I mean,
'Cause it's
these are
gonna be a
just
long
other
night.
citizens. It's going to be a long night. People are perhaps going to accuse you of things, and you're
That's
just trying to
correct,
do the
yeah.
right thing.
Yeah.
I think about the group of people that volunteer for property tax.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, people who
going
come
to-
in who are already mad,
Totally,
walking in the door,
totally.
and feel like their assessment, you know, is too high.
Yes.
And we got a little board in town of volunteers that has
deal with
to
that.
face those folks and deal with all that. So, you know, what is the
Yeah.
engagement model of the future?
That's what I'm struggling
Yes.
with.
And I was glad I went. I mean, you think, well, I know what Eagle does or how this works. I learned
Yes.
things by going there. I learned about infrastructure. I learned about
right.
who's responsible. I got a phone number for the person you call if
Yep.
you smell a bad smell over there
Yep.
on the north side of town. And it's her job to come out and test that.
That's right.
So somehow, you know, I didn't even know some of that stuff before. So I wish I knew the answer.
A couple of other things that are coming up if people are looking for ways to get plugged in, right? You've got the neighborhood zoning and street discussions. Are those ongoing right now?
That's right, they are.
The citywide historic resources inventory. I think you're going to have some citywide meetings on that. So
is
if
true.
again, people are looking for ways to engage, maybe they didn't know that these things were happening. I mean, they could check the city website, but maybe they just don't do that on a regular basis and don't know about these things. So part of it, I think, is just a kind of a communication
Yes.
issue. How do we let our citizens in the city know, hey, here's an opportunity for you to get plugged in and have your voice be heard and come to this meeting and,
I mean,
give us your input. And
We've got to have a culture change. And I think that's part of the climate business,
Yes.
which is local engagement.
Yes.
And I mean, some of the most carbon neutral stuff you can do is talk like this.
That's exactly right.
And we really need to do that. And look at this table. I mean, I think you served on environmental concerns
Yeah.
for 6 years, right?
Yeah.
You got term limited out. So 10 of the 6 years Denise has been here, she was on that
That's
city
right.
environmental concern, which is when we first got to know
That's
each
right.
other, because I was a liaison there. But absent Denise, you know, look at the three of us.
Yeah.
You know, one message I'm really trying to get out is that you want to feel part of a community. And I know they say now, I just read a study actually, that younger people, the more on the phone they are on their phones,
Yes.
the lonelier they feel.
Yes.
You know, you're kind of looking for community, and as it turns out, that is a really thin, shallow pool when you're looking for community out there. This
Yeah.
is where community happens. It's with people, you know, sometimes it's harder,
right.
but it's more rewarding right here where you live. And not only on the city commission, but on boards. We need younger people who are energized and care about being here, volunteering to serve on some of these boards. And that really helps when it's time you say, I want to run for the city commission. Well, I've already been on the planning commission.
Right, yeah.
I know how that works.
Right.
I understand, you know, what are the functions,
Exactly.
what comes to environmental concerns committee and those sorts of things. So that's a message I really am hoping will get out there. As families decide to settle in town here,
Yeah.
what is going to be the part that you're going to play in terms of interacting and building our community right here?
I wanted to talk a little bit more, David, about some of the really good things that are happening with young people in the community.
Good segue.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the summer employment thing, you and I remember when we had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to get 115 jobs for the summer.
Right.
And last year we had, what, 700 kids
Something like
working
that.
in the summer? And every kid was interviewed on career choices to try to get them moving in that direction. I think that's wonderful. I think the parks and recreation thing is huge. We had these parks and they were there, but we didn't have any staff there.
Right.
Now we have staff that is planning activities for these kids every day. We used to charge. Now we don't charge for kids to go there. And part of the whole thing is that they do 20 minutes of reading with these
Right.
kids every day to get them started. Those are wonderful things. The youth mobility thing, terrific. But we know that our kids are not doing well on tests. We know that they are not doing well in taking advantage of the promise. So somehow we've got to find a way to bring together the wonderful resources that we have from the city, from communities and schools, from the promise, from the different the schools. We have a new superintendent coming in, and it seems like it's an appropriate time to say, how do we bring all this together? And Western. Western now is very interested in more involvement in the community, particularly the Department of Education and the College of Health and Human Services. How do we put all this together to kind of say, okay, we're going to get these kids not only through school, and the other thing about the new trade center that we're talking about.
Right.
We have these enormous opportunities, and they got to come together so that we, like you said with before, laser focus on these kids to make sure that they get a path to success.
Right. I know, and you've been passionate about that for your entire life. And that passion is not diminished one iota. I'm not sure if it's any more, but it's like continues this high level all the time. So I'm going to give you a ton of props for that. I mean, you've been talking about that. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the pieces are there. You know, we've got a new, younger, promised graduate who's director of communities and schools now, James Devers.
Yes.
Just here
Terrific
in
guy.
town. Yeah, awesome
Terrific
guy.
guy.
We've got, you know, the promise, Von Washington Jr.
Terrific.
moving into a new location, which is going to have a lot of site-based activities going on there. And, you know, we've got, for example, another thing, just the school that I live across the street from, Woodward School, Frank Rocco, the principal there. I don't know if you noticed this, but they were one of the 3 schools that the state said you got to close down. And they have done as good as any school in the state, just got recognized for that, and turnaround there. Now, what did they do at Woodward School? They went to year-round, like Washington Writers Academy did. So does that mean that experiment is working? I'm not sure, but I was over there to see that team over at Woodward just a couple days ago, because teacher is not a high-paid profession. Everybody in that school got focused on getting to that goal. And know what that proves? It's possible. So if we can do that, that's improving test scores, all those sorts of things. And this is like a school with, what, 90, 95% free and reduced lunch population at Woodward. Then we can scale that up, in my opinion.
That's
but
great.
in talking to Frank, who's the principal over there, Frank Rocco, they had, I mean, because the state came down on them, they had a mission with very clear numbers like you're talking about. Here's where we got to get to on test scores. This is what we got to do. Everybody pull together. Just what you're talking about, John. Let's get a simple set of numbers. Let's people pull together. And I think that kind of thing, how is housing part of that? You know, how is summer employment part of that? So
Good.
super energizing to talk about it, I think.
Good.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
We're getting a little short on time, but I did also want to, so when we came to the City Commission the night the climate emergency resolution was going to be considered, you had city staff come in who are involved with the Imagine Kalamazoo program, and I was super impressed with what you're doing there. Can you just give us kind of a broad overview of that and maybe a progress report?
I'd imagine Kalamazoo.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a big
Just like
topic.
there's like
That's a
eight
big one.
pillars
That's a
or
big
something
one.
like
There's
that.
like 8 slides to that.
Take 5 minutes to tell me everything you know.
Exactly.
Maybe 2.
Okay,
But
so as you know, Imagine Kalamazoo was primarily an engagement
That's
program.
right.
And I have to give our city staff, don't take any of the credit for that, for coming up with an engagement process that engaged more people through a very extensive outreach effort by going to where people were,
That's right.
by not saying, hey, come talk to us. And that created a plan,
That's right.
which has a bunch of pillars in that plan. And I know those are, you know, I can't give the 8-pillar elevator speech right now, but critical, important components in that plan that have basically given us our, you know, our mission
Right.
created by citizen input. here in Kalamazoo.
That's right.
And we are measuring those things, and we're watching what's happening and the pieces of that. And we are having a commission retreat coming up in March. But in my mind, that sometimes in the past you go in for a retreat, it's like, oh, now we're going to do this. This is our focus. Oh, now we're going to go over this way. This has got to be a retreat that looks back at all the work that's happened and the engagement that's created that infrastructure and say, are we making progress? Do we need to tweak this? You know, have we learned something the last year or two? But it's not time to mess with the dials much on that. I think that is this impressive piece of work generated by the community.
Yeah, I was super impressed that night with all your city staff coming in and making their presentations. And
Yeah. It's good we got so many folks there to hear that.
That's the way we do
It's again, right?
That was a-
Got
that was a bonus
time these
of,
the anger items with the other items. Maybe there's an agenda setting process that political scientists should think about.
Well, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about? We just have about 2 or 3 minutes left here. So
I just want to thank you so much. I really appreciate the format, and I'm hoping that we can do this again. And
We would love that.
Definitely have you back.
things that you need me to get answers to that you didn't think of during this time, and I can help with that, I will. So
Great.
appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Denise, I know you wanted to plug some of the Fridays for Future events that are coming up.
I can absolutely do that. So talking about getting involved and engaged with your community, again, you know, I'm your representative here for the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, doing exactly those things. So how do we best marshal the resources and people and time that we have towards that crisis, right? So there's lots of groups and people worried about that, and not everybody can do everything. But how can we best work together? And one of our main series is every Fridays at noon. You can come. Today they get to hear me. So double duty today.
Yeah.
At the very end, one of our closers will be Ron Kramer. So there's a series of those talks that are meant to build that community, as well as the knowledge base of how to get involved. So I'll be talking about specifically those things today. One of our great partners, Michigan League of Conservation Voters, is going to be hosting some trainings on how to talk to your elected officials. So maybe how best to have those conversations and when to have them. So we're trying to build those kinds of skills directly into the movement, along with some of that knowledge. I would also plug the Kalamazoo Public Library and our Kalamazoo Read, which is We Are the Weather. Saving the world begins at breakfast, about moving to plant-based diets, right? So this idea of health plus climate plus some individual choices. There's a food challenge that I've told my students I'm going to take. I'm kind of not a good environmentalist on this one. It's the whole month of February, and it happens to be a leap year, so I've got 29 days of it's not every day, but to drastically try to reduce, for example, my own meat consumption. So I've told the students that I will do that. We'll see how far I get, what I'm like, you know. But please come out. There's a whole series of talks. So there's the Friday lectures, but there are a whole series of other talks. You know, we can't squeeze everything into Friday at noon. So there are talks going on in this community over the next 2 to 3 months. Everything from how to deal with the despair of climate change to human behaviors to food transition. So there's just so much going on with that. And Jonathan Foyer, the author, will be here March 10th, which will also be a very busy day because that happens to be the presidential primary for Michigan. So I'm not sure how we're all going to arrange. Go vote, go absentee vote. Those are out, right? You can do your absentee. I've learned to call it vote by mail to the students. Absentee is a word that doesn't translate to Gen Z. Go do that so that you can come and enjoy the presentation and the wrap up of the Kalamazoo Public Library Read this year. Right. So there's a lot of different ways for you to not only learn what you need to know and the skills, but to find the people who are going to work on that with you. Like you said, you got to know the person to call sometimes to be able to get things done. So thanks for coming.
Yes,
I think that's it. We still got.
This has been a great critical issues program, and David, we definitely need to have you come back.
That'd be great.
We have a lot more to talk about. We need to get some reports from you about some of the issues we've raised with you. So again, thank you so much for coming in here.
Appreciate it.
And again, thanks to our great crew back there: Daniel Smith, Larry Mahana, Bob Kilday, our floor manager, John Pravancher. They do a great job. They make us look great out here. Thanks to you guys. Thank you for joining us on Critical Issues Alternative Views. Please come back again.